He was sleeping with my sister when I died. That was the first clear thought I had when I woke up in the ICU. No white light. No angel choirs. Just pain, slow and growing, like the kind that crawls up your spine when you've been frozen and are starting to thaw. I came back gasping, my chest rising as though life itself had to be physically shoved back inside me. The machine screamed. A nurse yelled something about vitals. And then, through the chaos, I saw them, David and June, standing side by side at the edge of the room. They were holding hands. I don't think they meant to. Maybe it was an instinctive thing. Or maybe they'd forgotten where they were, thinking I wouldn't be coming back to notice. But when David met my eyes and quickly pulled his hand away from hers, I knew. Something had broken in my absence. Or maybe it had already been broken long before. Maybe dying just gave me the vision to finally see it. David Halston had always been an easy man to trust. That's how he fooled me, with his quiet steadiness, his well-placed silences, the way he could make you feel heard without giving much of himself away. He was the kind of man people didn't question, and I was no exception. For 17 years, I built a life around him like he was bedrock. June was different. My little sister always was. She was electric, the kind of person you couldn't look away from. If I was the structure, June was the spark. People loved her, forgave her too quickly, gave her second and third chances she never earned. And I protected her. I mothered her, defended her, sacrificed for her. I loved her enough to look past every warning sign she ever gave me. And there were so many. 3 days after I left the hospital, I asked Maya, my 17-year-old daughter, how long June had been staying at the house. She paused just long enough to let a crack show. "A few days," she said. "You know, to help. To help your father?" Maya shrugged. "I guess." I didn't push. Not then. There was too much happening inside me already. The recovery, the medication fog, the lingering dreams of that bright white moment between life and death. But it planted something in me. A seed. And over the next week, as I tried to resume normal life, that seed grew. I'd wake up to the smell of her perfume in the hallway. Lavender and vanilla. June always wore too much of it. David hated perfume, or so he told me. One morning, I found a coffee mug in the dishwasher. June's. It had "Don't talk to me until I've had wine" scrawled across it in gold script. A bachelorette party gag gift. I'd seen it before, in her apartment in Boston. So why was it here? On the 8th night home, I dreamed of the in-between again. Of being dead. Only it wasn't the same light and peace people always talk about. It was colder this time. Still white, still silent, but colder. And in the middle of it, I saw something, my kitchen. My very real, very earthly kitchen. And June was there. David too. They weren't talking. They were kissing. Whispering. Laughing like teenagers. It was a dream, right? Except I didn't invent the way June's hand touched his neck. Or the tiny birthmark behind David's ear, a place I hadn't touched in years. I woke up soaked in sweat, not from fear, but from clarity. It had happened. Maybe not exactly like that, but close enough. They were sleeping together when I died. And now I was back. Brought back. But why? That's the thing no one talks about with near-death experiences. They don't end when your heart starts again. They follow you. They echo. Sometimes, I'd hear whispers in the house, even when it was quiet. Little words, barely there. She knows, or not yet. My mother used to call that kind of thing thin places. She was a deeply spiritual woman, not religious exactly. She didn't trust churches, but she believed in energy, in spirits, in truth finding its way to the surface. She died 4 years ago, but lately, I felt her everywhere. I even dreamed of her once, standing in our backyard, wearing that ugly mustard cardigan she loved so much. "You need to look deeper," she told me. "Not just at them. At you too." When I tried to ask what she meant, she turned and vanished into the trees. I told David I wanted to go through the attic. It was an excuse, of course, a way to dig through old things and see what might shake loose. He looked hesitant. "You're still healing," he said. "Maybe wait a few weeks." "I'm not paralyzed, David. I just died for 2 minutes. I can lift a damn box." His lips twitched like he wanted to say something else, but he didn't. Just helped me up the stairs and left me alone with the dust. Among the boxes, I found a stack of old photo albums. Our wedding. Maya as a toddler. And in between, a newer envelope, tucked in the back of a yearbook. It was labeled in my handwriting, June, for her 30th. A birthday gift I never gave her. Inside was the necklace. A thin silver chain with a small opal pendant. June loved opals. I'd saved up for it, ordered it months ahead. I had even written a note to go with it. "You'll always be my favorite troublemaker." But it was still here, unopened. So why did I see that exact same necklace around her neck 2 days ago? I sat in the attic, the air thick with dust and the weight of memory, and I finally asked the question I'd been too afraid to form. Had I come back to forgive them? Or to expose them? Either way, I was no longer the same woman who had died, and I wasn't going to be her ever again. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? They say death is like falling asleep. Peaceful. Silent. That wasn't how it was for me. I remember the exact moment it happened, the way the car skidded across the wet pavement, the white SUV coming out of nowhere, the horrible shriek of metal against metal. I remember the glass, how it seemed to explode in slow motion, catching the sunlight like glitter. And then, quiet. A quiet so complete it felt sacred. Then the light. But it wasn't heavenly. Not at first. It was harsh and blinding, like fluorescent lighting in a hospital hallway. There were no angels. No gates. Just a strange, suspended whiteness. It was like I was floating in a blank canvas world. And then, out of nowhere, my kitchen appeared. That sounds crazy, I know. I tried to tell a nurse once, and she smiled like I'd confused morphine with memory. But I saw it. I saw the blue ceramic backsplash I had picked out myself. The chipped counter edge I kept meaning to fix. And standing in the middle of it, David and June. They weren't speaking, not with words. But their hands, their eyes, they said everything. She touched his chest. He leaned into her. And I felt something snap. Like a rubber band that had been stretched too far for too long. Then, darkness. And pain. And machines screaming me back to life. I didn't tell anyone about the kitchen vision. Not yet. I wanted to believe it was trauma, or misfired neurons, or some subconscious fear bubbling up. Anything but the truth. But the truth has a way of leaking in, drip by drip. Like the way David flinched when I brought up that I remembered something from the accident. His smile froze for a fraction of a second. "Like what?" he asked too casually. "I saw a light," I lied. "And I think I heard someone talking. I just can't remember what they said." He nodded, relieved. Too relieved. "And June?" She never brought up the accident at all. Every time I mentioned it, she changed the subject. "The important thing is you're okay," she'd say, too brightly. "Let's not dwell on the scary stuff." But I had to dwell on it. It was all I had. That weekend, I went to our linen closet and dug out the old photo boxes. I told David I was reconnecting with my memories, and he smiled like I was healing. But I wasn't searching for memories. I was looking for cracks. And I found one. A picture from my 40th birthday, just 3 months before the accident. The 3 of us were at the dinner table. Maya had taken the photo. I was blowing out candles on a vanilla cake. I hate vanilla cake. Always have. Since I was a kid. It's dry and tasteless, and reminds me of school cafeterias. Everyone close to me knows that. Especially David. Yet there I was, in front of a giant vanilla cake, with "Happy Birthday Claire," spelled out in cursive buttercream. June's handwriting. I remember now, she had handed me the plate, grinning. "David picked it," she said. He said it's your favorite. He had smiled and nodded, kissed my temple. I had believed it. Why? The more I looked, the more strange little details surfaced. Slivers of the truth hiding in plain sight. The way David's phone used to buzz late at night. His client meetings that never showed up on our shared calendar. The way June would show up at the house unannounced, always when I was out, always leaving just before I returned. And Maya, she'd started pulling away months before the accident. I thought it was just teenage moodiness. But now I wondered, what had she seen? I found her on the back porch, curled up on the swing with her headphones in. I sat next to her without saying anything. After a minute, she took one earbud out. You okay? I don't know, I admitted. Can I ask you something kind of strange? Sure. Back when I was in the hospital, did Aunt June stay here? At the house? She hesitated. Just long enough. Yeah, she helped Dad. She stayed in the guest room. Every night. Maya looked away. I guess. I didn't count. Something inside me tightened. I tried to smile. Okay, thanks. And that was it. That was all I needed. That night, I stood at the doorway to our bedroom and watched David sleep. His back was to me, his breathing even. He looked like the man I married. But I didn't recognize him anymore. I crawled into bed next to him and whispered into the dark. Did you love her before I died or only after? He didn't stir. Or maybe he did, just barely. I lay awake until morning, and when I finally drifted off, I dreamed again of the kitchen. Only this time, I was standing there, watching them. I spoke. I said, "This isn't your house. This isn't your life." June turned. She looked straight at me and smiled. I woke up with a question pounding in my skull like a drumbeat. Was what I saw a dream or a memory? Because if it was a memory, then it didn't happen while I was dead. It happened before, which meant the betrayal had already begun. The first time I ever saw David nervous was the day he gave me the gift. It wasn't anything big, just a small velvet box. I remember looking at him, expecting more, maybe a trip to Paris, maybe a romantic dinner for two. But no, it was a simple box, and the nervous way he handed it to me made me feel unsettled. What's this? I had asked, already tearing the tissue paper away. He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Just open it. I did. Inside was a necklace. Simple, elegant, with a silver chain and a small, perfect diamond pendant. My favorite. I stared at it for a moment. I love diamonds. I always had. It's beautiful, I said, trying to sound thrilled. But the moment felt off, like there was something just beneath the surface of it all, something I couldn't name. But when David leaned in and kissed my cheek, I smiled back and buried the unease. I buried it because that's what I always did. I didn't question the small cracks, the little moments where something felt wrong, because I told myself it didn't matter. I had David. I had Maya. I had my family. And the truth was, I didn't even realize how deep those cracks had gone until I looked back at them and saw how much I had ignored. That night, when I saw the photo of the vanilla cake, everything clicked into place. Vanilla. It seemed like such a small detail, right? But the cake wasn't just any cake. It was vanilla. It didn't taste like anything, and it had never been my choice. I hated vanilla. My entire life, I had loathed it, the blandness, the dry crumb, the way it didn't ever quite measure up to the richer, more complex flavors of chocolate or red velvet. Vanilla was always the cake you gave someone when you didn't know them well enough to care what they liked. And yet, there it was, my birthday cake, the one David had picked for me. Vanilla. But that wasn't all. The more I thought about it, the more I remembered. I had never liked vanilla. I had told David this a dozen times. I told him on our first date, after he ordered me a vanilla latte. I told him when we sat at that cafe in Chicago and he bought me a vanilla cupcake. I had told him when we got married. I had told him even more than once after we had Maya because he always seemed to forget. So why, on my 40th birthday, had David ordered me a vanilla cake? Why had he picked it out and pretended it was what I wanted? Because it wasn't for me. It was for someone else. And when I put the pieces together, the perfect diamond necklace, the vanilla cake, I could almost hear June's voice in the back of my mind. David picked it. He said it's your favorite. David picked it. He said, not that I liked it, but that it was my favorite. And there it was again, the lie. I could see the pattern now. Every moment, every gift, every detail where something felt slightly off, it was all for her. June. The woman who had always been the perfect sister. The one with the laugh that filled a room. The one everyone forgave, no matter what. The one who could have anything, and apparently everything, that I had. I couldn't shake the image of the cake from my mind. That absurdly perfect lie. The vanilla, the sweetness of it, the way it had looked so normal. So casual. It made me feel small, like all these years had been spent building a life on a foundation of sugar that had only ever tasted good because it was coated in frosting. But the cake itself? The cake was dry, tasteless, hollow. 2 days after the discovery, I decided to confront David. The house was quiet that evening. Maya was at a friend's house, and the air felt still. Too still. David sat in the living room, flipping through some papers from work, pretending not to notice the way my eyes were trained on him. David, I said softly, we need to talk. He looked up, confused. About what? I stepped closer. About everything. His eyes narrowed, just slightly, the way he always did when he was trying to figure out what I knew. It made me sick to my stomach. Claire, you're still recovering. You should be resting, not. David, I cut him off. Why did you get me a vanilla cake for my birthday? He blinked, the question clearly taking him off guard. He cleared his throat. What's wrong with that? You don't like vanilla. I hate vanilla, David, I said, my voice firm now. I've always hated vanilla. You've always known that. A flicker of discomfort passed across his face. He shifted in his seat. I thought maybe you'd changed your mind. You know, people change. I wanted to laugh. It was such a small thing, this cake. So trivial. But it was a symbol of the bigger lie, the one that had been building between us for years. No, you didn't get that cake for me. You got it for someone else. Didn't you? David stood up, his eyes wild now. Claire, what are you talking about? This is insane. I saw you. Both of you. When I died. I said it, and his face went pale. The air went still between us. I don't know what you think you saw, but you were out of it. No, I shook my head. I wasn't. I saw you. And I saw her. I saw you both in the kitchen. In the house that's supposed to be mine. David's hands gripped the sides of the chair. You don't know what you're saying. You're still coming back from this. No. I'm not coming back from anything, I said, my voice sharp, cutting through the half-truths he kept throwing at me. I died, David. But this life? I'm done pretending. You're done lying to me. And, for the first time since I had returned, I saw it, the flicker of guilt in his eyes. The shame. The hesitation. I left him standing there, my heart thudding in my chest. I don't know what I thought would happen. Maybe I expected him to break down. Maybe I wanted him to confess everything, to apologize. But he didn't. Instead, he said nothing. And I knew then, I wasn't going to get any answers from him. Not now. Not ever. But I was going to get them from somewhere. Even if I had to tear apart everything I had built to find them. The silence that followed David's denial was suffocating. There was no apology. No explanation. Just a cold, distant look in his eyes, a look I had never seen before, but one I knew too well now. It was the look of someone caught, but not caught enough to admit it. I didn't know what I had been expecting from him, but I sure as hell hadn't been prepared for this kind of coldness. This deflection. He had always been the one to comfort me, to calm me down when my nerves got the best of me. But tonight, I saw him for what he was. A man who had lied to me. A man who had betrayed me long before the accident. I closed my eyes briefly, trying to steady my breath. The ache in my chest wasn't physical, but it was heavy, suffocating, like someone had taken my heart and shattered it, piece by piece. But there was no time to cry. Not now. I was too close. Too close to the truth. The days that followed were a blur of forced conversations and polite gestures. David tried to act like nothing had changed, like I hadn't just confronted him about the woman he'd been having an affair with, but the cracks were showing. He no longer touched me the way he once had. No lingering kisses. No shared moments in the kitchen over coffee. No warmth. I could feel the weight of it. That suffocating silence. That unbearable tension. June, though, was different. She still showed up at the house as if nothing had happened. Still laughed too loudly. Still made herself comfortable in my kitchen. Still threw herself into my life as though everything were perfectly fine. I hated it. I hated that I couldn't find a way to confront her, to ask her how long she had been lying to my face. How long she had been wearing that smile, pretending to be my sister, when all along she had been my enemy. But even more than that, I hated that, despite everything, I still couldn't look away. It was one of those evenings when the weight of everything seemed like too much to bear. I was sitting in the living room, watching the muted television screen, but not really paying attention to it. The house felt too quiet, too empty, like the air had thinned out and there was no one left but me and the ghosts of the past. Then came the knock at the door. I opened it to find June standing there, smiling that smile of hers, the one that always made her seem younger than she was, the one that made you believe she was harmless. But there was something behind her eyes now, something I couldn't quite place. "Hey, Claire," she said, her voice light and cheerful. "I was just in the neighborhood. Can we talk?" Talk. I didn't want to talk. Not to her. Not to anyone. But I forced myself to step aside and let her in. As soon as she crossed the threshold, I could feel it, that familiar tension between us, that silent understanding that had always lingered under the surface, but was now so painfully obvious. "Is everything okay?" I asked, though I knew the answer already. She smiled again, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, just, I wanted to check on you. You've been through so much lately." I almost laughed at how ridiculous it sounded, coming from her. The same woman who had been hiding behind the smile, lying through her teeth about everything. But I kept my composure. "For now. I'm fine," I said, my voice cool, distant. "Just trying to adjust." We stood there in awkward silence for a moment before June stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She had that look in her eyes again, like she was deciding whether to say something. Something important. "Look, Claire," she said, finally, her tone shifting. "I know things have been tense, but I want you to know something. David and we were only close because of you. I never meant to hurt you." That stopped me cold. I stared at her, waiting for more, trying to read between the lines, trying to decipher what she wasn't saying. "I don't believe you," I said flatly. "I don't believe you for 1 second. Her face faltered, just for an instant. I caught it. The guilt, the uncertainty. It was there, and I didn't miss it. "I didn't know it would go this far," she added quietly. "It was just a comfort, Claire. Just something I didn't realize would happen." "Stop," I said sharply. "Stop trying to make me feel sorry for you. This isn't about you feeling guilty. This is about you taking my life and pretending it was yours." She took a step back, her eyes wide now, her smile gone. "I didn't take anything from you, Claire," she whispered. "I swear. I never meant to hurt you." "Then why did you do it?" I asked, my voice tight. "Why did you do this to me, June? Why him?" She looked away, her lips trembling. "I never meant for things to get this out of hand. You're my sister. I never wanted to hurt you." I stepped closer to her. "Then why did you sleep with my husband? Why did you destroy everything we had?" I was weak, Claire. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't. I didn't realize. Her voice cracked. She was breaking. And for a brief second, I felt something, an ounce of pity. A fraction of the forgiveness I had once offered her so easily. But then I remembered. I remembered the nights I'd come home to find them together. I remembered the way she always knew too much. The way she always had a way of getting close, getting too close. I think you did know what you were doing, I said, my voice hardening again. You just didn't care. June stepped back, tears pooling in her eyes. She bit her lip, as though trying to hold back a sob, but it was too late. I was done. I think you should leave, I said softly, the words no longer filled with rage, but with something deeper. Something darker. She nodded, her eyes filled with regret, but she didn't say anything else. She turned and left without another word. As the door clicked shut behind her, I stood in the quiet, the weight of her absence settling into the air like dust. I wanted to feel triumphant. I wanted to feel powerful, like I had finally confronted the woman who had torn my world apart. But all I felt was empty. Was this the truth I had been seeking? And if so, what now? The house felt emptier after June left. I don't mean quieter. It wasn't the silence that gnawed at me. It was the absence. The absence of trust. The absence of any semblance of the life I had once believed in. And most of all, the absence of the woman who had always been my sister, my confidant, my best friend. It felt like my entire life had been built on a foundation of sand, and I was just now realizing that the tide had long since washed it all away. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen. The soft hum of the refrigerator the only noise in the stillness. I had made dinner, though I wasn't hungry. I hadn't felt hunger for days, not since the moment I came back from the dead and realized just how little I really knew about the people closest to me. David had gone to bed early. His usual routine. I'm sure he thought I would follow him soon, that we'd continue pretending things were fine. But I couldn't. Not after everything I had learned, and especially not after what June had said. I didn't realize. I didn't know what I was doing. It kept echoing in my mind. She didn't realize? Bullshit. I hadn't realized either. Not until I came face to face with the truth. But that didn't make me any less angry. That didn't make me any less betrayed. The truth was, June had always known what she was doing. She had known exactly what she was doing when she flirted with David, when she stood too close to him, when she touched his arm. She knew. And David knew too. The whole damn thing had been a game. A sick, twisted game. I opened the drawer where I kept my journal. The pages were filled with the quiet ramblings of a woman who once believed in the sanctity of family. I hadn't written in it for months, not since the accident. But tonight, I needed to put my thoughts somewhere. I grabbed a pen, and the words started spilling out. They say the truth will set you free. But what if the truth just leaves you empty? I thought I knew everything about my life, my marriage, my family. I thought I had it all. But all of it was a lie. David doesn't love me the way he used to. He never did. June never wanted to be my sister. She wanted to be something else entirely. Now I'm left with the shards. And I don't know what to do with them. I paused. I couldn't write anymore. My hand was shaking too much, my mind spinning in circles. But then something else came to me, something I hadn't considered before. I had always known June was a little too perfect, too put together. She had a way of making everything look effortless. Her life always seemed flawless, like she was always in control. She'd always been the one who was calm, poised, the one everyone turned to when they needed help. I used to admire her for it. But now, looking back, I wondered how much of it had been a mask. A mask she wore to hide the fact that she had been playing all along. The thought made my blood run cold. And then I thought of the one thing I hadn't dared to question until now, my daughter, Maya. Maya had been quieter than usual since I came home. I didn't know if it was because of the accident, or because of the tension that had built between David and me. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to ask her. I had to ask her what she knew. The next day, after school, I found Maya in her room, lying on her bed with her headphones in. I knocked lightly on the door before stepping inside. She looked up from her phone, her face lighting up for a second before her smile faded. "Hey, Mom," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Maya," I said gently, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Can we talk?" She sat up, pushing her hair behind her ear. "Of course. What's up?" I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know where to start, but I had to start somewhere. "Maya, do you know anything about what's been going on between David and June?" She froze, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought she hadn't heard me, but then I saw it, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her lips pressed together like she was holding back something. "Maya," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "you don't have to protect anyone. I need to know." She looked away, staring at the floor for a long time. I waited and waited. Finally, she looked up, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a while: fear. "I don't want to get involved," she whispered. "It's not my place." But I could see it in her eyes. She knew something. I pressed on, my voice gentle but insistent. "Maya, please. I just need to understand what happened. You don't have to protect me. Or anyone. I need to know the truth." Her gaze dropped back to the floor, and for a moment, she seemed like she was weighing something heavy. Then, she exhaled slowly. "I'm not supposed to tell you, but I saw them, Mom," she said in a barely audible voice. "I saw Aunt June and Dad together. Before the accident." I felt the world tilt beneath me. My breath caught in my throat. "How long?" I whispered. She hesitated again, as if she were debating whether to tell me more, but she didn't look up. "A while. I don't know exactly, but I saw them, and I don't know if they saw me." My mind spun. My worst fear was now a reality. And yet, hearing Maya say it aloud made it even worse. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want to make things worse," she said. "I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to be the one to tear everything apart." And in that moment, I realized something. It wasn't just David and June who had lied to me. It was everyone. Maya had been keeping the secret too. I sat there, processing what I had just learned, and I realized that the truth, the ugly, messy truth, wasn't just something that had happened. It was something I had been a part of, unknowingly. I had been blind to the signs. I had let myself believe in the lies, and now I was paying for it. But I couldn't undo it. I couldn't fix the damage. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The hardest part about betrayal is that it doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't strike like a bolt of lightning that leaves you crumpled and helpless. No, betrayal creeps in slowly. It wears down your defenses. It's the sound of footsteps just behind you, soft and careful, until one day you realize you've been followed all along. I sat at the kitchen table, the empty cup of coffee in front of me growing cold. It had been hours since Maya had left the room, hours since I learned the final piece of the puzzle that I had been trying to put together. But the answer, the truth, didn't feel like a victory. It wasn't satisfying in the way I'd imagined it. Instead, it felt like I had been drowning for so long, and now that I could finally breathe again, I didn't know how to handle the air in my lungs. Maya hadn't said much after her confession. She'd barely looked at me, but I could tell she was relieved to have shared it, even if she hadn't wanted to. Her eyes had been wide with guilt, but she hadn't been able to hide the truth any longer. David and June had been seeing each other for months. And the worst part? They never thought I would find out. I stood up from the table, walking aimlessly around the house. The walls, once familiar, now felt like a maze of secrets I could no longer navigate. Everything about this house seemed foreign to me. The pictures on the walls, the family portraits, the spaces where we had once shared our lives, all of it now felt like a lie. As I walked down the hallway toward the living room, I stopped in front of a mirror. I hadn't noticed it before, but it was there, a large mirror that had been hung on the wall next to the staircase. I stared at myself in the reflection, my face pale, my hair a mess, eyes red from the restless nights I'd spent thinking about everything. I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. I had always thought of myself as strong, a survivor, someone who could handle anything life threw my way. But now, I couldn't even recognize myself. I had built my life around the idea that I could control the things that mattered most, my family, my marriage, my happiness. But now that I knew the truth, I realized how little control I had over any of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't let me. It kept replaying the same scenes, David and June, whispering in corners, laughing too loudly, touching too intimately. They had both been hiding behind smiles, pretending that everything was normal, that nothing was wrong. But I had seen through it. I had seen it all. I could still remember the first time I'd noticed something was off. It had been subtle, something I had brushed off at the time, a glance, a touch, a lingering moment. But over time, the pieces had begun to fall into place. The late nights, the strange excuses, the way David acted differently when June was around. And still, I had chosen to ignore it. I had pretended it didn't matter. The next day, when I woke up, I had made a decision. I was done. Done with pretending. Done with holding my tongue. Done with being the woman everyone thought they knew, the one who forgave, the one who stayed silent, the one who let herself be lied to. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let David and June think they had gotten away with it. Not anymore. David was in the kitchen when I walked in. He didn't look up at first, but I could feel the tension in the air, like a thread stretched so thin it might snap at any moment. I stood there for a moment, just watching him. I wanted him to feel uncomfortable. I wanted him to understand that this silence between us was the prelude to something far worse. Finally, he spoke. "You okay?" His voice was weak, like he was trying to sound concerned, but couldn't quite pull it off. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Was he really still trying to act like the caring husband, after everything? "I'm fine," I said coolly. "But we need to talk." David stiffened. His eyes flicked to me for a brief moment before looking away again. He wasn't ready for this. But I was done waiting. "I know about you and June," I said, my voice steady but cold. He didn't say anything at first. For a long moment, he just stood there, frozen. But then, when he spoke, it was almost a whisper. "You don't know everything, Claire." I raised an eyebrow. "Try me." He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading, as if trying to hold on to whatever dignity he had left. It was a mistake. I don't know how it happened. I was stupid. I laughed bitterly. A mistake? A mistake? David, do you think I'm that naive? You've been seeing her for months. How long were you planning to keep up this lie? I didn't want to hurt you, Claire. I never meant for it to go this far, he said, his voice faltering. But the sincerity wasn't there. Not anymore. You didn't want to hurt me? Is that why you and my sister slept together in our house? In our bed. I was shaking now, the anger seeping through me despite my best efforts to keep it at bay. He winced at the mention of the bed, but didn't speak. His silence said everything. "I don't know why I stayed with you all this time," I said, the words coming out harsher than I intended. "I don't know why I believed in you." "Claire, please," David begged, stepping toward me, but I held up my hand to stop him. "No. I'm done," I said firmly. "I'm done pretending this is anything other than what it is. You and June? You've destroyed everything. You've destroyed me." David opened his mouth to say something, but I turned and walked out, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't care what he had to say anymore. I didn't care what excuses he had. I had already made up my mind. As I left the kitchen, I realized something. This wasn't just about David and June. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about me. It was about finding my voice again. It was about no longer accepting the lies. It was about taking back the life that I had lost. The day after I confronted David was eerily quiet. I half expected him to try to beg for my forgiveness or to apologize for the mess he'd made. But he didn't. There were no words. Just a heavy silence between us that felt suffocating in its stillness. He had retreated into his own space, just as I had into mine. I knew the silence wasn't peace. It wasn't resolution. It was the calm before the storm. I spent the morning pacing around the house, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling that had settled in my stomach. There was a tension in the air now, a weight that pressed down on everything I did. Every step I took felt too loud. Every breath felt too shallow. But still, I pushed through. I wasn't going to let David's silence intimidate me. Not anymore. I walked into the kitchen, grabbing the coffee pot and pouring myself a cup, though I had no real desire for it. It was just another ritual, something to occupy my hands, to occupy my mind. My body was a machine now, working on autopilot. Survival mode. I could hear David moving around upstairs, the soft creak of floorboards and the muffled sound of water running. But still, there was no talking. No confrontation. Not yet. I knew he was waiting for me to make the next move, but I was no longer the woman he could control. I wasn't going to make the first move this time. Not when everything between us had been shattered beyond repair. Then, there was a knock at the door. I froze, the cup of coffee halfway to my lips. Who could it be? I set the cup down and walked slowly toward the door, my heart racing in my chest. It was too early for visitors. When I opened the door, I didn't expect to see her. June. She stood there, looking just like she always did, flawless, her hair falling in soft waves around her face, that practiced smile on her lips. But there was something different in her eyes today. Desperation. "Claire," she said softly, almost too softly. "We need to talk." I felt a wave of bitterness rush through me, but I forced myself to keep my composure. I wasn't going to let her walk in and pretend like everything was fine between us. Not anymore. Talk? I repeated, almost incredulously. "I think we've already talked enough, don't you think?" Her eyes flicked to the side, as if looking for the right words. "I know you're angry, Claire. I understand why. But this isn't easy for me either." I crossed my arms, stepping back slightly to let her into the house. "Then why did you do it? Why did you sleep with my husband?" The words tasted bitter on my tongue, but they were the only words that seemed to matter now. She took a hesitant step forward, looking around the house before speaking again. "I never meant for it to happen like this. It wasn't supposed to be like this." I couldn't hold back my laugh. "No, June, it never is it? Nothing you do is ever supposed to happen. But it always does, doesn't it? And here we are." Her face faltered slightly, the smile slipping as she met my gaze. There was something else there now, something genuine. I could see it in the way she hesitated, in the way she seemed to struggle with her next words. "I don't want to lose you, Claire. You're my sister. You mean everything to me." Her voice wavered as she spoke, and for a moment, I almost believed her. But I had learned better by now. "Don't," I said sharply, cutting her off. "Don't stand there and pretend like you didn't know exactly what you were doing." "You and David," I stopped myself, not wanting to give her the satisfaction of hearing my anger. Instead, I softened my voice, pushing down the rage that was rising inside me. "You didn't just make a mistake, June. You betrayed me. And I don't know if I can forgive that." She looked away, her fingers fiddling with the hem of her shirt. I could tell she was trying to hold it together, but I could also see the cracks forming. She wasn't as confident as she had been when I first confronted her. The walls were starting to fall. "I know," she whispered. "I know. And I'm sorry. It wasn't enough." The words were hollow. They didn't reach me. Because I was past the point of caring about apologies. I was past the point of trying to fix what had already been broken. "You don't get to apologize anymore, June. You and David both," I said, my voice steady but final. "The damage has been done. And nothing you say is going to change that." She looked down, tears welling up in her eyes. But she didn't cry. She didn't let herself. I saw the same woman standing before me, the one who had destroyed my trust, the one who had turned my life upside down. And I realized, for the first time, how much I had underestimated her. I watched her leave, her steps slow and deliberate as she walked back down the driveway. I stood in the doorway for a long time after, not sure what to do next. The house felt emptier than ever. I had faced June. I had confronted her. And yet, the feeling of betrayal still clung to the air, suffocating me. David hadn't said a word when I returned inside. I could tell by the stillness in his gaze that he was waiting for me to decide what came next. But I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't ready to make a decision, not when everything felt like it was falling apart. I didn't know how long I sat there, lost in thought. The afternoon passed in a haze, the sun sinking lower and lower in the sky as I stared at nothing. But one thing was clear to me now: this wasn't over. The storm was coming. And I wasn't going to let anyone else control it. Not David. Not June. Not anyone. I stood up, the quiet weight of my thoughts lifting for the first time in days. This was my life. And I was going to take it back. There's a saying I've heard before: walls are built to keep people out. But walls also keep people in. I used to think it was just another idiom. But now, after everything that had happened, I knew it was true. The walls I had built around myself weren't there to protect me from the world. They were there to protect me from the truth. To protect me from the reality of what I'd allowed to happen. I had shut myself in. And now it was time to tear those walls down. It was early the next morning when I started. The sun had barely risen, but the quiet of the house felt heavier than it ever had before. The silence between David and me had stretched so thin it felt like a taut rope, ready to snap at the slightest tug. I wasn't going to wait for it to snap. I wasn't going to give David the power to pull me back into the darkness I had just begun to escape from. I grabbed my phone from the counter and texted my attorney. I want a divorce. I didn't wait for a response. I couldn't. I had already made up my mind. It was a hard decision, but it was the right one. My marriage wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a prison. And David had locked me in it, thrown away the key. It wasn't that I wanted to punish him. But I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I couldn't keep living a lie. I spent the next few hours gathering my things. Clothes, documents, anything I could carry with me. I didn't know where I would go yet, but I wasn't going to stay here any longer. I wasn't going to wait for David to come to me with his apologies or excuses. I wasn't going to wait for June to try to fix things either. The life I had known was gone. The only thing left now was to move forward. David was still asleep when I finished packing. I wasn't going to confront him now. Not yet. This was something I had to do on my own without his influence. As I stood in the doorway, I took one last look around the house. This was it. The life I had once loved. The life I had fought for was no more. And as much as it hurt, as much as the ache in my chest threatened to undo me, I knew I couldn't stay. I couldn't let this broken shell of a life define me. I walked out of the house and into the early morning light, feeling the weight of everything I was leaving behind. But there was also a strange sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I drove aimlessly for hours, not knowing where I was going, just needing to escape the prison I had been living in. The landscape blurred outside the window, the trees and streets passing by as I focused on the road ahead, on the space I was creating for myself. Finally, I ended up at a small diner on the edge of town. The neon sign flickered as I pulled into the parking lot. I stepped inside and took a seat in the corner booth, the weight of the decision still hanging over me but lighter than it had been all week. I ordered coffee, but I wasn't thirsty. It was just something to hold in my hands, something to anchor me in the moment. It was then that I realized something. The person I was before, the woman who had let David and June walk all over her, who had allowed herself to stay in the shadows, she was gone. And in her place was someone new. Someone stronger. But even now, there were moments of doubt. What would I do now? Where would I go? Would I be able to build a life for myself? And what about Maya? I hadn't talked to her much since I left the house. She had been quiet, withdrawn. I could feel the tension between us, the weight of my decision hanging in the air. But I knew I couldn't wait for her to understand. I couldn't keep myself chained to a life that had become unbearable just to appease her. Still, she was my daughter. And no matter how angry I was, no matter how broken I felt, I knew I had to find a way to make this work for her. For us. I returned home late that evening, the sun already set, leaving the house in an eerie quiet. I knew David was still there, probably waiting for me to come back to explain myself. But I wasn't going to do that. I was done explaining myself. I took a deep breath and walked upstairs, only to find David sitting at the foot of the bed, staring at the floor. His hands were clasped together, his posture defeated. "Claire," he said quietly when I entered the room. "We need to talk." I stopped in the doorway, my resolve unwavering. "No, David. We don't." He looked up at me, his eyes full of pleading, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to soften the blow. "I've made up my mind," I said firmly. "I want a divorce. It's over. And there's nothing you can say to change that." He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He didn't try to convince me that things could get better. Instead, he stood up slowly, looking more resigned than anything. He was broken not because of my decision, but because he knew, deep down, that he had broken us first. "Okay," he said quietly, his voice cracking slightly. "I won't fight you, Claire. I know I've ruined everything." I nodded, not feeling relief, but an emptiness that felt just as heavy. It wasn't the end I had imagined, but it was the one I needed. It was the end of my old life, the life I had built on lies and deceit. And now it was time to rebuild. I walked out of the room, feeling the weight of my decision. It wasn't easy. It never would be. But in that moment, I knew that I had done the right thing. I was tearing down the walls, not just the ones David had built around me, but the ones I had built around myself. I was stepping into the unknown, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. The moment the decision was made, I thought the hardest part was over. The divorce papers were signed, the house was half empty, and David and I barely spoke anymore. I was alone, free from the chains of betrayal, and I thought I could finally breathe. But then, the storm came. It started small. A message from Maya. A simple text. "Where are you, Mom?" I had been avoiding her as much as it hurt. I didn't know how to explain everything that had happened. The divorce, the affair, the shattered family. I didn't want to burden her with the chaos I had created. But as her words hit me, I realized that there was no avoiding it. She deserved to know. I texted her back, "I'll be home soon. We need to talk." Her response came quickly, "I'll be waiting." I had no idea how she would react, but I knew it was time. Time to face the storm that was brewing not just outside, but inside of me too. When I arrived home, the house felt different. The silence was deeper now, filled with a tension I couldn't escape. I walked upstairs to her room, hesitating for a moment before knocking. When I pushed the door open, she was sitting on her bed, her back to me, staring at the wall. "Maya?" I said softly. She didn't move at first. Then, slowly, she turned her head toward me. Her eyes were red, swollen, as if she had been crying. She'd been holding this in. "Mom," she whispered, voice shaky. I don't know what's happening. What's going on with you and Dad? Why? Why are you leaving him?" The words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. She didn't know. She had no idea what was really going on. And I had kept it that way, thinking I could protect her from the hurt, from the reality of what had happened. But now, there was no way to hide it anymore. I sat down next to her on the bed, taking her hand in mine. "I never wanted you to know this way," I said, my voice breaking. "But I can't keep this from you. Your father and we've been through a lot. He betrayed me, Maya." She pulled her hand back, confusion clouding her face. "Betrayed you? What do you mean?" My chest tightened as I took a deep breath. He was seeing someone else. Another woman. And it's been going on for months, maybe even longer. I found out about it, and I had to make a choice. I couldn't stay with him after that. For a long moment, Maya just stared at me. Then, her expression turned to anger. Why didn't you tell me sooner, Mom? Why didn't you say something? I didn't want to hurt you, I answered, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want you to have to carry that weight. But I should have told you. I should have been honest with you from the start. She shook her head, the tears falling freely now. You think I wouldn't understand? I'm not a little kid anymore. I know what's been going on. I've seen how he's changed. How you've changed. My heart broke at her words. I had tried to protect her, but in doing so, I had kept her in the dark. I hadn't been there for her the way I should have. I had failed her. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice trembling. I'm so sorry. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, looking at me with a mixture of hurt and frustration. I don't know what to believe anymore. He's always been the one I could rely on. And now you're telling me he's just gone? That everything I thought I knew was a lie. I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me, the storm inside me swelling as she spoke. This wasn't just about David and June anymore. It was about Maya, about the family we had been. The foundation of our lives was crumbling, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I know, honey, I said, my voice breaking. I know it's hard, but we'll get through this. We'll figure it out together. It wasn't just Maya who was suffering. The storm was raging inside me, too. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it all flooded through me, the waves crashing over me like a tidal wave that I couldn't outrun. I had spent so long holding it all in, pretending like everything was fine, trying to keep the peace. But now, I realized just how much damage that silence had done. Not just to me, but to my daughter, to my entire family. The longer I had stayed silent, the more fractured everything had become. I couldn't fix it all. I knew that. But maybe, just maybe, I could start by confronting the storm head-on. That night, I called David. I couldn't avoid him forever. I knew we had to talk, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. But it was the only way to move forward. He answered on the second ring. Claire, he said, his voice tired, hoarse. I know we need to talk. About everything. I could feel the weight of his words, the years of guilt and regret that were pressing down on him. But I wasn't going to let him off the hook that easily. I'm not doing this for you, David, I said, my voice firm. I'm doing it for Maya. I'm doing it for myself. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I know, he whispered. I know. And I'm sorry. I've been a fool. You've hurt us both, I said. And I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were. But we have to try to fix what's left. For her. For us. As the conversation ended, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The storm wasn't over, not by a long shot. But I was finally facing it, ready to move through it instead of letting it swallow me whole. There would be no quick fix, no happy ending where everything went back to normal. But maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. The storm had broken, but the rebuilding had only just begun. The days following that night were some of the hardest of my life. There were no easy answers. No simple resolutions. The cracks in my marriage, in my family, ran deeper than I had ever realized, and mending them seemed impossible. But something in me had shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't running away from the storm. I was ready to face it, to rebuild, piece by piece, even if it meant walking through the fire. Maya and I spent the next few days talking. Really talking. I told her everything, the truth about David, about the affair, about the pain I'd been hiding for so long. And in return, she shared her own fears, her confusion, her anger. We cried together, but we also found something else. Understanding. It wasn't easy, and I knew it wasn't going to be perfect. But in those moments, as we sat in the quiet of our living room, I realized that we were starting to heal. One conversation, one tear, one confession at a time. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I knew that I had made the right choice. I called David again. This time, I was ready to have the hard conversation, to talk about the future, or more accurately, the lack of it. We met at a local cafe, the place where we used to go when things were simpler, when we were still in love. It felt surreal to be sitting across from him, both of us silently aware of how much had changed. "Claire," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can. I've messed up everything. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I truly am." I studied him for a long moment. There was genuine remorse in his eyes, but I knew that his apology didn't change what had been broken. What had been lost? Trust. The one thing that could never be rebuilt in a day, in a year, or maybe even a lifetime. "I don't know if you can fix it either, David," I said softly, but firmly. "But I need to tell you that I'm done. I've had enough of the lies, of the pretending. I can't keep living like this, trapped in a life that's no longer mine." He nodded, his shoulders slumping in resignation. "I understand." There was a finality in the air between us, an unspoken agreement that we had both come to. This wasn't the ending we had imagined, but it was the one we needed. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later. The papers came through, and just like that, my old life was over. But in its place, something new was beginning to grow. I moved into a small apartment in the city, a place where I could breathe freely, where I could start fresh. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The walls were bare, still echoing with the emptiness of change, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maya came to visit me every weekend. At first, it was awkward. She missed her old room. She missed the house. And sometimes I saw the sadness in her eyes, the way she looked at me as if she was unsure who I was anymore. But over time, things began to shift. Maya started to see the woman I had become, strong, resolute, and free. And slowly, our relationship began to heal. I spent my days focusing on myself. I went back to therapy. I joined a yoga class. I found new hobbies, things I had put on hold for years, things I had forgotten about in the chaos of my marriage. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. But with each passing day, I felt more like myself again. The woman I had been before David and June, the woman I had been before the lies and the heartbreak, was starting to emerge once more. One afternoon, a month after everything had fallen apart, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. My hair was growing back, my skin was clearing up, and I looked different. Stronger. More determined. For the first time in a long time, I didn't see the woman who had been betrayed, the woman who had cried herself to sleep, the woman who had wondered if she would ever be enough. Instead, I saw a woman who had survived. A woman who had thrived despite the storm. And I smiled. Not just at the reflection in the mirror, but at the person I was becoming. It was the first time I realized that this was my rebirth. David and June were no longer the people I defined myself by. My past, no matter how painful, was just that, the past. What mattered now was the future I was building for myself, for Maya, for the woman I was becoming. And as I stood there, in the quiet of my new apartment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. True peace. The kind that comes when you let go of the past and choose to step forward into the unknown. The phone rang that evening. It was David. He had called a few times before, but I had avoided answering. I didn't need to hear his apologies anymore. I didn't need him to explain himself, but something inside me told me I needed to pick up this time. I did. "Claire," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want you to know that I'll always care about you. I'll always love you. You've been a huge part of my life. And even though we're not together anymore, I want to make sure you're okay. I want to make sure Maya is okay." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but it didn't matter anymore. "I'm okay, David," I said softly. "We're both going to be okay. And that's all I need now. I've found peace. We both need to find our own way forward." He was quiet for a moment, and I could tell he was struggling with something. But then he spoke again, his voice steady. I'm proud of you, Claire. You're stronger than you know. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. The storm had passed, and now I was free. I closed my phone, taking a deep breath as I stared out of the window at the city's skyline. There was so much to look forward to, so much to rebuild. And though I had lost so much love, trust, a family, I had gained something far more valuable, myself. The weeks that followed the divorce were like a haze, a strange limbo where I could neither move forward nor go back. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Was I the woman who had been betrayed? The one who had been foolish enough to trust? Or was I something more, someone capable of surviving this, and perhaps even thriving because of it? But the truth was, I didn't know yet. I was still figuring it out. I spent days lost in my new routine, keeping to myself. Work was a blur, my mind often wandering during meetings, and evenings passed in a quiet solitude I wasn't yet used to. But then, one evening, as I scrolled through my phone, I saw something that stopped me cold. A message. It was from an unknown number. You have no idea how much I've been waiting for this. My heart skipped a beat. Who was this? Was this David? Or someone else? The message didn't make sense. It felt cryptic, and yet it made my skin crawl. I quickly typed back, my fingers trembling. Who is this? There was no response for a few moments, and I felt my pulse quicken. Then, the phone buzzed again. It's time for you to know the truth, Claire. The words echoed in my mind for hours. The truth? What truth? Was this another person from David's life? Another part of the tangled web I thought I had escaped? I couldn't just let it go. The curiosity gnawed at me. This person knew something. Something I didn't. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I paced around my apartment, trying to make sense of everything. How could someone, anyone, have access to the hidden parts of my life that I had long buried? I couldn't wait. I had to meet this person. The following evening, I drove to a small cafe on the edge of town. It was a place I didn't recognize, tucked away like a secret. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw a figure standing near the entrance, a woman alone, wearing a long coat. Her back was to me, and I could feel a strange sense of unease flood my chest. She turned as I stepped out of my car, and for the first time in a long time, I felt an unfamiliar knot of fear twist in my gut. She smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was calculating, sharp. Claire, she said, her voice low, almost mocking. I've been waiting for you. My body tensed, but I stepped forward, trying to mask the unease that had taken over my mind. Who are you? I demanded. What do you want from me? The woman studied me for a moment before responding. I'm the one who's been watching over everything you thought you knew. The one who has all the answers. The one who can finally give you the truth. I tried to keep my composure, but inside, my mind was racing. I could feel my hands shaking as I clenched them into fists. This wasn't just some random person. This was someone who knew everything. Someone who had seen the cracks in the facade of my life before I even realized they existed. You can't just show up here and, I started, but she cut me off. No, Claire. You have no idea what you've been living through. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. The betrayal goes deeper than you can imagine. And I'm the one who's been pulling the strings behind it all. I stepped back. What are you talking about? Who are you? And then, she revealed something that shattered everything. I'm June, she said, as if her name was the only thing that mattered. I'm the one who taught David everything he knows. And you're not the only one who's been played. My world tilted, the ground beneath me feeling like it was about to crumble. June. David's lover. The one who had taken everything from me. The one I had only known as the woman who had torn apart my life. But she wasn't just an affair. No. She was much more than that. The pieces of the puzzle that had never made sense suddenly fell into place. The way David had changed overnight. The way I'd been pushed aside so easily. And now here was June, standing in front of me like some twisted puppet master, claiming responsibility for everything. I was paralyzed, my mind unable to catch up with the storm of emotions that raged inside me. Betrayal, anger, shock. I wanted to scream at her, hit her, but all I could do was stand there, staring. You think I didn't know? June's eyes darkened. You think I didn't see the way David looked at you? The way he lied to both of us? But let me tell you something, Claire. It's not over. Not by a long shot. You're not the only one with a story to tell. And then she handed me an envelope. I think it's time for you to finally see the truth, she said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. I took the envelope, though my hands were unsteady. Inside, there was a letter. A letter that would change everything. I opened it, the words inside sending a shiver down my spine. The letter was from David. But this wasn't just any letter. It was a confession. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?